5 days ago, my younger brother Tyler held my rescue inhaler above his head while I gasped for air at our family barbecue, my lungs burning like someone had poured acid down my throat. The words that came out of his mouth still echo in my nightmares. I don't have asthma, so you're not allowed to have it either. I dropped to my knees on the concrete patio, begging him with what little breath I had left, and he just laughed that cold, cruel laugh I'd heard my whole life. "Already gasping, loser?" he sneered, watching me turn blue. This morning, that same brother sat trembling in a courtroom chair. Let me take you back to understand how we got here. Growing up in the rolling suburbs of Denver, Colorado, Tyler was everything our parents, Robert and Linda Sterling, had dreamed of in a son. 3 years younger than me at 25, he'd been the golden boy since he could walk. Star quarterback at Jefferson High School, throwing perfect spirals that won us 3 state championships. Valedictorian with a 4.0 grade average that never wavered even during football season. Full academic and athletic scholarship to the University of Colorado Boulder, where he majored in business and minored in making our parents beam with pride every single day. Meanwhile, I was Brant, the asthmatic older brother, who spent more time in hospital waiting rooms than on playing fields. Severe asthma had been my constant companion since I turned 7 years old. While Tyler scored touchdowns, I was learning to recognize the early warning signs of an attack. While he gave graduation speeches, I was memorizing which emergency rooms had the shortest wait times. Our parents loved me, sure, but they loved Tyler like he was their personal miracle. The comparisons started early and never stopped. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the family motto. When Tyler brought home report cards filled with A's, Dad would ruffle his hair and talk about legacy and potential. When I brought home B's and C's because I'd missed weeks of school due to breathing problems, I got lectures about applying myself and not using my condition as an excuse. Tyler resented every doctor's appointment, every inhaler refill, every family event we left early, because my chest was tightening. He saw my medical needs as stealing attention that rightfully belonged to him. What I didn't understand then was how that resentment was growing into something much darker. Both of us ended up working at Sterling & Sons Construction, the company Dad built from nothing into one of Denver's most successful residential and commercial builders. Tyler was being groomed as the heir apparent, learning every aspect of the business from foundation to finish work. I handled the accounting, project management, and client relations work that let me stay mostly indoors, where I could control my environment. The family barbecue 3 weeks ago was supposed to celebrate Tyler's promotion to vice president. Dad had invited the whole extended family plus key employees and their families. Tyler was glowing, soaking up congratulations and talking about his vision for the company's future. I was genuinely happy for him, proud even. That's what makes what happened next so devastating. The attack started innocently enough. I was manning the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs for about 30 people scattered across our parents' backyard. Spring in Colorado can be brutal for people with asthma, and the pollen count that day was off the charts. I felt the familiar tightness starting in my chest, that sensation like someone slowly tightening a belt around my lungs. I reached into my pocket for my rescue inhaler, the same automatic movement I'd been making for over 20 years. But before I could bring it to my lips, Tyler's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. At first, I thought he was trying to help, maybe noticing I was struggling before I fully realized it myself. "Just panic, bro," he said loudly enough for nearby relatives to hear. "Take some deep breaths." But his grip on my wrist was iron tight, and he was slowly forcing my hand away from my mouth. The inhaler was right there, inches from my face, but I couldn't reach it. My breathing became more labored than desperate. The familiar panic of not being able to get enough oxygen started flooding my system. That's when Tyler leaned in close enough that only I could hear what he said next, and whispered the words that changed everything between us forever. Maybe if you stop breathing, Dad will finally see I'm the only son he needs. The next few minutes blurred together like a nightmare sequence. I remember dropping to my knees on the concrete patio, my vision starting to tunnel as my oxygen levels plummeted. Tyler still held my inhaler above his head, and to anyone watching from a distance, it might have looked like he was just keeping it safe while I caught my breath. But up close, his expression was something I'd never seen before. Pure cold calculation. My cousin Jessica, Dad's niece, who'd driven up from Colorado Springs for the celebration, was recording the party for family memories. She had her phone out, capturing what she thought would be a sweet moment of brotherly care during a medical emergency. Instead, she captured Tyler's true face as he looked down at me, struggling for air. "I don't have asthma, so you're not allowed to have it either," he said, still speaking quietly, but not quite quietly enough. Jessica's phone was close enough to pick up every cruel word. Already gasping loser. The worst part was how he seemed to enjoy it. There was this sick satisfaction in his eyes as he watched me suffer like he was finally getting revenge for every doctor's appointment, every family dinner cut short, every moment in our lives when my medical needs had taken attention away from his achievements. Jessica realized what was happening before anyone else. She lunged forward and wrestled the inhaler out of Tyler's grip, shoving it into my hands, just as my vision was starting to go black around the edges. Those first puffs of albuterol felt like salvation, like breathing cool mountain air after being trapped in a burning building. But Tyler wasn't done. As the medication started opening my airways and I began to recover, he immediately shifted into damage control mode. "Geez, Brant, you really scared us there," he said loudly, putting his hand on my shoulder in what looked like brotherly concern. "Good thing I grabbed your inhaler before you dropped it." Most of our family bought the performance. They gathered around asking if I was okay if I needed to go to the hospital, praising Tyler for being such a caring brother. Dad clapped Tyler on the back and said something about always being able to count on him in a crisis. Mom fussed over me, but also thanked Tyler for taking charge when I was too panicked to think straight. Only Jessica knew the truth. I could see it in her eyes as she helped me to a chair, the shock and disgust at what she'd witnessed. But I caught her arm before she could say anything, shook my head slightly. Something in my expression must have told her I needed time to process what had just happened. I spent 2 days in Presbyterian St. Joseph Hospital while doctors monitored my oxygen levels and adjusted my medications. The attack had been severe enough to cause some inflammation that took time to calm down. Tyler visited once, bringing flowers and wearing the mask of the concerned younger brother perfectly. He even brought homework from the office project files that needed my attention. But when we were alone in the hospital room, the mask slipped just enough for me to see the real Tyler underneath. "Hope you learned something from this," he said quietly, arranging the flowers in a vase. "Sometimes stress can really trigger these attacks, like when people overreact to simple situations." He was rewriting history even as I lay in the hospital bed, turning his deliberate cruelty into my medical overreaction. The message was clear. This was my fault for being weak, for having asthma, for needing the inhaler in the first place. Jessica came to visit on the second day when Tyler was at work. She closed the door behind her and pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "Brant, I need to show you something," she said, her voice tight with emotion. I recorded the whole thing. Watching that video was like experiencing the attack all over again, but from the outside. Jessica's phone had captured everything: Tyler's cruel words, his deliberate withholding of my medication, the calculated way he'd positioned himself to look helpful while actually endangering my life. The audio was crystal clear. His intentions were unmistakable. "We have to show this to Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda," Jessica said immediately. They need to know what really happened. Tyler could have killed you, but I asked her to wait. I know that sounds crazy now, but at the time I couldn't bear the thought of being seen as the weak brother who couldn't handle family conflict without running to his parents. I'd spent my whole life in Tyler's shadow watching him excel while I struggled just to breathe normally. The last thing I wanted was to be seen as pathetic, unable to stand up for myself against my younger brother. I convinced Jessica to keep the video private while I handled things directly with Tyler. I thought I could reason with him that maybe the attack had been an aberration brought on by stress from his promotion or too much beer at the barbecue. I thought my brother, despite everything, couldn't possibly have meant to hurt me that badly. I was about to learn just how wrong I could be. The confrontation happened 3 days after I got out of the hospital. I found Tyler in his office at Sterling & Sons reviewing blueprints for a new subdivision project. He looked up when I knocked, and for just a split second, I saw something flicker across his face. Not guilt exactly, but acknowledgement. He knew why I was there. "Feeling better, big brother?" he asked, leaning back in his leather chair. "Good thing I was there to help during your little episode." Little episode. That's what he called a near-fatal asthma attack that he deliberately triggered and prolonged. I closed his office door and sat down across from his desk, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "Tyler, we need to talk about what really happened at the barbecue," I began. "What you said to me holding my inhaler away when I needed it. That wasn't helping. That was dangerous." His expression didn't change, but something cold crept into his eyes. "I think the stress of your attack is affecting your memory," he said slowly. "Everyone saw me helping you. Everyone thanked me for keeping you calm and getting your medication to you quickly. You said maybe Dad would finally see you as his only son if I stopped breathing." I pressed. "You deliberately kept my inhaler away from me while I was having a severe attack." Tyler laughed the same cruel sound from the barbecue. "That's quite an accusation, Brant. Sounds like something someone might say if they were embarrassed about having a panic attack in front of the whole family. Maybe trying to blame someone else for their own weakness." Then his expression hardened completely. "And if you ever repeat those lies to anyone, I'll make sure Dad and Mom understand just how unreliable you've become. How your medical problems are affecting your judgment and your ability to handle responsibility." That threat sent a chill down my spine, but not for the reason Tyler intended. It was too specific, too confident. Like he'd already been planning what to say if I confronted him. Like he'd already been building a case against me. I started paying attention after that conversation, really paying attention to Tyler's behavior around the office and with our family. What I discovered over the next week was a systematic campaign of sabotage that had been going on for months, maybe even years. Tyler had been intercepting my emails. I discovered this when a client, Mrs. Henderson, called to complain about a meeting I'd supposedly canceled at the last minute. When I checked my calendar and email, there was no record of any cancellation, but when I dug deeper into the server logs, I found evidence that someone with administrative access had been deleting my emails after they were sent, then sending new messages from my account with different information. Project timelines I'd carefully negotiated with contractors were being changed without my knowledge. Deadlines I'd set based on material delivery schedules and weather considerations were being moved up by weeks, making me look incompetent when projects inevitably fell behind. Client meetings I'd scheduled were being moved to times when I had medical appointments, making me appear unreliable and unprofessional. The worst discovery was a folder on Tyler's computer labeled Brant Issues. Inside were detailed reports he'd been writing about my supposed performance problems, missed deadlines that were actually his fault, client complaints that were responses to his changes, not my original work, medical absences carefully documented and framed as excessive and unprofessional. He'd been building a case against me for months, creating a paper trail that made me look like a liability to the company. Every breathing treatment, every doctor's appointment, every day I'd worked from home during bad air quality alerts was being twisted into evidence of my unreliability. But the most devastating discovery was in his project files. Tyler had been stealing my ideas and presenting them as his own innovations. The sustainable building techniques that had won us 3 major contracts this year, those were based on research I'd done during my recovery time at home, when I'd used my forced rest periods to study green building methods and cost reduction strategies. The promotion Tyler had just received was built on my work. The recognition he'd been getting from industry publications was for innovations I'd developed. His whole reputation as the brilliant future of Sterling and Sons was constructed on stolen intellectual property and systematic sabotage of my career. And it wasn't just professional. Tyler had been interfering in my personal life too. My girlfriend Sarah had been acting distant and suspicious for weeks, asking strange questions about my commitment to our relationship and my feelings about responsibility. When I finally pressed her about what was bothering her, she revealed that Tyler had been having private conversations with her about my struggles. He'd told Sarah that I'd been talking about feeling trapped by family expectations and wanting to escape responsibility. He'd suggested that I saw our relationship as another burden during my health struggles, and that I'd been considering moving away from Denver to start fresh somewhere else. None of this was true, but Tyler had presented it as confidential information he was sharing out of concern for Sarah's feelings. The pattern was becoming clear. Tyler wasn't just resenting my asthma or competing with me for our parents' attention. He was systematically destroying every aspect of my life, professional and personal, while positioning himself as the responsible, caring brother who was constantly cleaning up my messes. But the most chilling discovery came when I checked the browser history on the computer we shared for project research. Tyler had been researching asthma triggers, not general information about the condition, but specific searches about environmental factors that could cause severe attacks. Pollen counts, air quality indexes, common allergens in workplace settings, foods that could trigger allergic reactions in people with asthma. He'd been studying how to hurt me. The barbecue incident wasn't spontaneous cruelty triggered by stress or alcohol. It was the culmination of months of research and planning. Tyler had been waiting for the right opportunity to cause a severe attack in front of our family, an attack he could then frame as my own medical incompetence, while positioning himself as the heroic brother who saved my life. Except he hadn't planned on Jessica's phone being close enough to record his real words. He hadn't expected her to be paying close enough attention to see through his performance. And he certainly hadn't expected me to survive long enough to piece together his larger campaign against me. As I sat in my office that evening, surrounded by evidence of Tyler's systematic betrayal, I realized I was facing something far more dangerous than sibling rivalry, or even casual cruelty. My brother wasn't just trying to outshine me or compete for our parents' approval. Tyler was trying to erase me from the family entirely, and he'd nearly succeeded at the barbecue by literally stopping me from breathing. The question now was what I was going to do about it, and whether Tyler would escalate his campaign before I could protect myself. Tyler's behavior became bolder after our confrontation, like he'd decided subtlety was no longer necessary. Within days, I started noticing deliberate attempts to trigger my asthma and allergies around the office. He'd bring peanut butter sandwiches to meetings knowing my severe nut allergy could trigger respiratory problems. He'd schedule important client presentations during my regular medical appointments, then express disappointment when I had to choose between my health and my career. The most disturbing incident happened during a site visit to our Lakewood project. Tyler insisted I inspect the second-floor framing even though the construction crew was using a concrete saw that filled the air with fine particulate dust. When I asked for a few minutes for the air to clear, Tyler made a show of checking his watch and sighing dramatically. "We're already behind schedule because of your other appointments this week," he announced loudly enough for the construction foreman and his crew to hear. "Sometimes we have to push through discomfort to get the job done." I ended up having a minor attack on the job site, wheezing and coughing, while trying to complete the inspection. Tyler stood there taking notes on his clipboard, documenting my inability to handle standard construction environments for his ongoing file of my supposed performance issues. But the real breaking point came when Tyler announced his plan for a company camping trip to demonstrate team building and leadership among our key employees. He'd chosen a location near Estes Park in the mountains west of Boulder, specifically for what he called its rustic back-to-nature atmosphere that would challenge everyone to step outside their comfort zones. What Tyler didn't mention to the group was that he'd specifically chosen a campground surrounded by aspen trees during peak pollen season. The location was 30 miles from the nearest hospital, with spotty cell phone service and no immediate access to emergency medical care. For someone with severe asthma and environmental allergies, it was essentially a death trap disguised as a team-building exercise. When I privately expressed concerns about being so far from medical facilities during high pollen season, Tyler's response was swift and public. During the next staff meeting, he made a point of discussing the importance of commitment to family business values and how personal limitations shouldn't prevent team members from fully participating in company growth opportunities. Of course, if anyone feels they can't handle the challenges of outdoor leadership development, we'll understand, he said, looking directly at me. But we need to know who's truly committed to taking this company to the next level. The message was clear to everyone in the room. Declining the camping trip would be seen as another example of my medical needs interfering with business responsibilities. Tyler was betting I wouldn't risk my professional reputation by backing out, even though participating could literally kill me. I packed extra inhalers, allergy medications, and even considered bringing a portable nebulizer. But Tyler noticed my preparations and made a point of commenting on them during the drive to the campground. "Bringing the whole pharmacy with you, I see," he said cheerfully as he loaded my medical supplies bag into his truck. "Don't worry, big brother. Fresh mountain air will be good for you. Might even cure some of that anxiety that triggers your attacks." The first 2 days of the camping trip were manageable. I stayed close to the main camp area, avoided the hiking trails that led through heavy tree cover, and used my rescue inhaler more frequently than usual, but without any major problems. Several of our employees, including Marcus Williams, our senior project supervisor, made a point of checking on me and asking if I needed anything. Marcus had been with Sterling & Sons for 20 years and had watched both Tyler and me grow up around the construction sites. His own son had asthma, so he understood the challenges I faced and the seriousness of my condition. I noticed him watching Tyler's behavior with increasing concern as the weekend progressed. On the final evening, Tyler organized a group campfire and storytelling session. He positioned my tent downwind from the fire, claiming it was the best spot for participating in the group activities. As the evening wore on and more wood was added to the fire, the smoke became thicker and more irritating to my already sensitive airways. I moved my chair several times, trying to find a position where I could participate without breathing the worst of the smoke. Tyler noticed my discomfort and made it into a teaching moment for the group. "Sometimes in leadership, we have to deal with uncomfortable situations," he announced to the gathered employees. "The key is not to run away from challenges, but to face them head on and build character through adversity." By the time the group started cleaning up for the night, my chest was tight and my breathing was labored. I reached for my rescue inhaler only to realize it wasn't in my pocket where I always kept it. I checked my tent, my backpack, everywhere I'd been sitting during the evening. The inhaler was nowhere to be found. Panic started setting in, both from the missing medication and from the physical stress of not being able to breathe properly. I asked Marcus if he'd seen my inhaler anywhere, and he immediately organized several other employees to help search the campsite with flashlights. That's when Tyler appeared with a dish towel and a look of exaggerated concern on his face. "Oh no," he said just loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I think I accidentally knocked your inhaler into the lake while I was washing dishes. I saw something fall into the water but thought it was just a piece of trash." The lake was 15 feet deep at the end of the small dock where Tyler claimed the accident had happened. Even if the inhaler was retrievable, it would be useless after being submerged in mountain lake water for hours. My backup inhaler was in my medical bag, which Tyler had insisted on storing in his locked truck to keep it safe from wildlife. But now Tyler claimed he couldn't find his keys in the dark. And besides, we should probably wait until morning to look for them properly. This is exactly why you can't rely on crutches-like medication to solve every problem, Tyler told me, as my breathing became more labored. Sometimes you need to just tough it out and breathe through the panic. But I wasn't panicking. I was having a real severe asthma attack triggered by smoke exposure, environmental allergens, and stress 30 miles from the nearest medical facility with no access to emergency medication. That's when Marcus Williams stepped forward with his cell phone raised. "Tyler," he said quietly but firmly, "I've been recording this conversation, and I recorded you deliberately throwing Brant's inhaler into the lake 20 minutes ago." The campfire area went completely silent, except for my labored breathing. Marcus continued, his voice steady and angry. "My son has asthma. I know what a real emergency looks like, and I know the difference between helping someone and hurting them. What you just did could kill your brother." Several other employees stepped forward, admitting they'd been uncomfortable with Tyler's treatment of me throughout the weekend, but hadn't known how to intervene. Sarah Chen from our accounting department revealed she'd seen Tyler deliberately placing my tent in the worst possible location for smoke exposure. Jake Morrison, one of our younger project managers, admitted he'd watched Tyler going through my medical supplies bag earlier in the day. As my attack worsened and my lips started turning blue from lack of oxygen, Marcus made the decision that probably saved my life. He smashed the passenger window of Tyler's truck with a rock and retrieved my backup inhaler from the medical bag. Those first puffs of albuterol felt like salvation, like breathing cool mountain air after being trapped underground. But Tyler wasn't finished. Even as I sat on a log, gasping for air and slowly recovering from a near-fatal attack, he tried to maintain his narrative. "This is exactly what I've been talking about," he told the gathered employees. "Brant's medical problems are becoming a liability for everyone. We can't have someone on our team who creates emergencies that put other people at risk." That's when Marcus played back the video he'd recorded. Tyler's voice came through clearly on the phone's speaker. "Sometimes you need to just tough it out and breathe through the panic. And this is exactly why you can't rely on crutches like medication." But more damning was the earlier footage Marcus had captured, showing Tyler deliberately throwing my inhaler into the lake while claiming to wash dishes. The video showed Tyler looking around to make sure no one was watching before casually tossing the inhaler into the deep water with a small, satisfied smile. For the first time in my life, I watched my brother's carefully constructed mask slip completely away in front of witnesses. Tyler wasn't just careless or insensitive about my medical needs. He was actively, deliberately trying to hurt me. And he'd been caught in the act by people who could no longer ignore or rationalize his behavior. The drive back to Denver the next morning was the longest 3 hours of my life. Tyler rode in silence, his jaw clenched, and his knuckles white on the steering wheel. But I could see him thinking, planning his next move. Getting caught hadn't made him reconsider his actions. It had just made him angry that his plans hadn't worked. I knew this wasn't over. If anything, Tyler would escalate now that his methods had been exposed. The question was whether I'd finally learned enough to protect myself, and whether the evidence we'd gathered would be enough to stop him before he succeeded in his ultimate goal. Marcus Williams became my lifeline in ways I hadn't expected. The morning after we returned from the camping trip, he appeared at my office door with a manila folder and a grim expression that told me everything I needed to know. His 20 years with Sterling and Sons had earned him respect throughout the company, and his son's asthma gave him personal insight into just how dangerous Tyler's behavior had become. "Brant, we need to talk," he said, closing my office door behind him. What happened this weekend wasn't an isolated incident. I've been watching Tyler's treatment of you for months, and I'm not the only one. Marcus opened the folder to reveal photographs, written statements, and phone video clips from multiple company employees. Sarah Chen had documented several instances where Tyler had deliberately scheduled my meetings during medical appointments, then criticized my absences in front of clients. Jake Morrison had witnessed Tyler tampering with project timelines and deadlines to make me look incompetent. Most disturbing were the statements from employees who'd worked on job sites with both of us. They described Tyler's pattern of exposing me to known respiratory irritants while framing it as necessary business activities. Concrete dust paint fumes, sawdust from treated lumber, even bringing cats to job sites when he knew about my severe pet allergies. My son Danny has dealt with bullies at school because of his asthma, Marcus explained. I recognize the tactics. Tyler's been systematically undermining your health and your career, then using your medical responses as evidence that you're unfit for the family business. But Marcus had done more than just document Tyler's workplace behavior. He'd been quietly investigating the business side of Tyler's sabotage campaign. As senior project supervisor, Marcus had access to financial records and project files that revealed the true scope of Tyler's deception. Those sustainable building innovations that got Tyler his promotion, Marcus said, sliding a stack of papers across my desk. I remember when you first started researching those techniques during your recovery time last year. You shared your ideas with me before you ever mentioned them to Tyler. The papers showed a timeline of my research development and implementation of cost-saving green building methods. Email records proved I'd been working on these innovations for months before Tyler ever claimed credit for them. More damaging, Marcus had found evidence that Tyler had been accessing my computer files and copying my research without permission. He's been stealing your intellectual property and presenting it as his own work, Marcus continued. But that's not the worst part. Look at this. Marcus showed me financial records indicating small but consistent discrepancies in project accounts, always tied to jobs where I was the primary manager. Money was being moved around, expenses were being inflated, and payments to contractors were being delayed in ways that made me look careless with company funds. Tyler's been embezzling, Marcus explained, but he's using your access codes and digital signatures to make it look like you're responsible for any missing money. If these discrepancies ever came to light during an audit, you'd be the one facing criminal charges. The scope of Tyler's campaign was breathtaking. He wasn't just trying to make me look bad or compete for our parents' approval. He was systematically destroying my professional reputation, my financial standing, and my physical health, while positioning himself to take over the company without any competition from his older brother. Marcus recommended his sister-in-law, Patricia Hayes, an attorney who specialized in assault and workplace harassment cases. Patricia had handled several high-profile cases involving family businesses and sibling conflicts, and Marcus felt she would understand both the legal and personal dynamics of our situation. Meeting Patricia was like finally having someone take my concerns seriously. She reviewed Marcus's evidence, Jessica's video from the barbecue, and my own documentation of Tyler's behavior with the focused attention of someone who'd seen similar patterns before. What your brother has been doing constitutes criminal assault, workplace harassment, embezzlement, and potentially attempted murder, Patricia explained during our first consultation. The premeditated nature of his actions, especially the camping incident, shows clear intent to cause serious bodily harm. Patricia helped me organize all the evidence into a comprehensive case file. We had witness testimony from multiple employees, video evidence of Tyler's deliberate actions, financial records showing his embezzlement scheme, and documentation of his systematic sabotage of my work and health. But before filing any formal charges, Patricia insisted I confront my parents with the evidence. Family dynamics in business cases can be complicated, she explained. Your parents need to understand what's been happening and have a chance to address it internally before we involve law enforcement. The family confrontation took place on a Sunday afternoon at my parents' house, the same backyard where the barbecue incident had occurred just weeks earlier. Patricia accompanied me along with Marcus and Jessica, who brought her video evidence. Tyler was there with our parents, having been told only that we needed to discuss some concerns about family business operations. Dad and Mom were initially skeptical when I began explaining Tyler's behavior. They'd spent 25 years seeing Tyler as the perfect son, the responsible brother who always looked out for me. The idea that he'd been systematically undermining me seemed impossible to them. But the evidence was overwhelming. Jessica's video showed Tyler's cruel actions at the barbecue with crystal clarity. Marcus's workplace documentation revealed months of calculated sabotage. Patricia's financial analysis exposed the embezzlement scheme that could have destroyed the entire company's reputation. Tyler's response to being confronted with evidence wasn't remorse or denial. It was fury. "You've always been jealous that I'm better at everything," he snarled at me in front of our parents. "You can't stand that I'm stronger, smarter, and more successful than you'll ever be." But then Tyler made the mistake that revealed the true depth of his psychological problems. As our parents sat in stunned silence, absorbing the evidence of his systematic cruelty, Tyler kept talking. "I've been hoping for years that one of your attacks would finally finish the job," he admitted, his voice shaking with rage. "Every time you started wheezing and gasping, I thought maybe this would be the time you'd just stop breathing and I wouldn't have to share anything with you anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Our mother started crying not just from sadness, but from horror at what her younger son had become. Dad sat with his head in his hands, realizing that the son he'd been grooming to take over the family business was a person capable of trying to murder his own brother. Tyler seemed to realize he'd gone too far, but instead of backing down, he doubled down on his hatred. "You want to know the truth? I've been tampering with his medication for years. Switching out his inhalers with empty ones, hiding his backup supplies during attacks, even researching what foods and environments would trigger the worst reactions." He was confessing to attempted murder multiple times in front of witnesses, and he seemed proud of it. "The only thing I regret is that you survived long enough to turn everyone against me." Patricia was recording everything on her phone with everyone's permission. Tyler's confession was clear, detailed, and legally admissible. But more importantly for our family, it showed my parents exactly what kind of person their golden child had become. The transformation in my parents' faces was painful to watch. Dad immediately fired Tyler from Sterling and Sons and told him to clear out his office immediately. Mom was devastated, blaming herself for enabling Tyler's behavior and missing the signs of his psychological problems. But Tyler wasn't finished destroying lives. As he stormed out of the house, he made threats against me, against Jessica for recording the barbecue incident, and against Marcus for turning employees against family. He promised that if he was going down, he'd make sure I went down with him. Patricia filed for a restraining order that evening, and we began preparing criminal charges the next morning. But I had a feeling Tyler's threats weren't empty, and that his exposure would make him more dangerous, not less. Patricia moved quickly to file comprehensive criminal charges against Tyler, including assault, with intent to cause bodily harm, criminal harassment, embezzlement, and attempted murder. The evidence was overwhelming, but Patricia warned me that Tyler's clean record and community reputation might work in his favor initially. Judges and juries have a hard time believing that someone who appears successful and well-adjusted could be capable of systematic cruelty toward a family member, she explained. But we have video evidence, multiple witnesses, and his own recorded confession. That's more than enough for a conviction. The legal process began moving forward, but the personal and professional consequences started immediately. Dad called an emergency board meeting for Sterling and Sons, explaining the situation to our key investors and business partners. The reaction was swift and unanimous. Tyler was terminated from all positions, removed from company accounts, and banned from company property. Several of our major clients expressed concern about the liability issues Tyler's behavior had created. The Hendersons, whose custom home project Tyler had been managing, requested a meeting to discuss whether they wanted to continue working with our company, given the family dysfunction and potential criminal activity. This is exactly the kind of situation that destroys family businesses, Dad told me privately after the board meeting. If word gets out that we had someone in a leadership position who was embezzling funds and endangering employees, our reputation could be permanently damaged. But Dad also made a decision that surprised everyone, including me. He announced that he was immediately beginning the process of transitioning company leadership to me, effective as soon as the legal situation was resolved. Tyler's systematic undermining of my work had actually demonstrated my value to the company, since the projects he'd tried to sabotage had been successful despite his interference. I've been blind to Tyler's problems and blind to your strengths, Dad admitted. The sustainable building innovations, the client relationships, even the way you've handled this crisis shows the kind of leadership this company needs going forward. Mom was struggling more with the emotional impact of Tyler's actions. She'd started seeing a therapist to address her role in enabling Tyler's behavior and missing the warning signs of his psychological problems. I knew he was competitive with you, she told me through tears, but I never imagined he was capable of trying to hurt you deliberately. The community response was mixed. Some people who knew Tyler from high school or college found the charges impossible to believe. He'd been charming, successful, and well-liked by almost everyone outside our immediate family. But others, particularly people who worked in construction or had medical conditions similar to mine, understood the seriousness of his actions. Marcus organized a show of support from Sterling & Sons employees, with several people writing character letters for me, and statements about Tyler's workplace behavior for the court proceedings. Sarah Chen revealed that Tyler had been pressuring her to falsify financial records, something she'd refused to do but hadn't reported due to fear of losing her job. Tyler hired an expensive defense attorney who immediately began building a case around mental health issues and family dysfunction. His lawyer argued that Tyler's actions were the result of undiagnosed psychological problems exacerbated by family pressure and sibling rivalry, not criminal intent. But Tyler himself undermined his defense strategy. Instead of expressing remorse or seeking psychological help, he began a campaign of harassment against the witnesses in his case. He left threatening voicemails for Marcus, and Jessica sent angry emails to company employees who'd provided statements against him, and even tried to contact Sarah to convince her to recant her testimony. Each of these contacts violated the restraining order and provided additional evidence for the prosecution. Patricia documented every violation, building a pattern of ongoing harassment that contradicted any claims of mental health issues or lack of criminal intent. The most disturbing escalation happened 3 days before Tyler's trial was scheduled to begin. I was working late at the office, catching up on projects that had been delayed during the legal proceedings, when the security alarm went off around 11 p.m. The security footage showed Tyler using a copied keycard to enter the building. He spent nearly an hour in the office going through files in both his old office and mine, using a computer to access company records and searching through storage areas where we kept old project documents. But when police arrived to arrest him for breaking and entering, they found something in Tyler's car that transformed the charges from harassment to attempted murder with premeditation. Tyler had zip ties, plastic bags, and a detailed floor plan of my apartment complex with notations about security cameras and emergency exits. According to the police report, Tyler had been planning to break into my apartment and stage what would look like a robbery gone wrong, or a medical emergency triggered by an asthma attack. The plastic bags suggested he intended to suffocate me, while the zip ties indicated he planned to restrain me first. Patricia called me at home with the news at 6 in the morning. Brant Tyler's been arrested for attempted murder with premeditation. The evidence they found suggests he was planning to kill you within the next few days. The reality of how close I'd come to dying hit me like a physical blow. Tyler hadn't just been trying to hurt me or make me look bad. He'd been escalating toward murder. And if the security alarm hadn't gone off when it did, I might not have lived to see his trial. The attempted break-in made Tyler's trial a much more serious matter. His defense attorney tried to argue that Tyler had only been trying to retrieve personal belongings from the office, but the materials found in his car and the detailed plans for accessing my apartment made his intentions clear. Local news picked up the story, running headlines about sibling rivalry and a family business turning deadly. The coverage was embarrassing for our family and company, but it also brought public attention to issues around medical abuse and family violence that often go unreported. More importantly, Tyler's escalation had eliminated any possibility of plea bargaining or reduced charges. He was facing multiple felony counts with potential sentences that could put him in prison for decades. As his trial date approached, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that Tyler would finally face consequences for his actions, but sadness that our family had reached this point. The brother I'd grown up with, competed with, and even admired, despite our differences, had become someone willing to kill me rather than share our parents' love or our family's business. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. For the first time since childhood, I wasn't living in Tyler's shadow or apologizing for my medical needs or trying to prove I deserved space in my own family. I was finally free to build the life and career I wanted without constantly looking over my shoulder for the next attack. The trial lasted 6 days, and every moment felt surreal. Sitting in that courtroom watching Tyler in an orange jumpsuit with his hands shackled, I kept thinking about the golden boy quarterback who used to practice perfect spirals in our backyard. How do you reconcile those memories with a person who spent years planning your death? Jessica testified first, showing her video from the barbecue to the court. Watching that footage on a large screen in front of a jury was devastating. Tyler's cruel words echoed through the courtroom. "I don't have asthma, so you're not allowed to have it either. Already gasping loser." Several jurors looked visibly disturbed as they watched Tyler deliberately withhold my medication while I struggled for breath. Marcus took the stand next, presenting his documentation of Tyler's workplace harassment and the camping incident. His testimony was particularly powerful because he spoke as both an experienced construction supervisor and a father whose own son had asthma. "In 20 years of construction work, I've never seen anyone deliberately expose a coworker to respiratory hazards," Marcus told the jury. "This wasn't workplace hazing or sibling rivalry. This was systematic attempt to cause serious bodily harm." Patricia had organized our evidence masterfully. Financial records showed Tyler's embezzlement scheme. Computer logs proved he'd been stealing my intellectual property. Witness statements from multiple employees documented months of calculated harassment. And Tyler's own recorded confession at our parents' house provided undeniable evidence of his intentions. When I took the stand, I tried to focus on the facts rather than the emotions. I described growing up with severe asthma, the constant fear of not being able to breathe, and how Tyler had weaponized my medical condition against me. I explained how his behavior had escalated from passive-aggressive comments to active sabotage, to eventually withholding life-saving medication. The hardest part wasn't the physical attacks, I told the jury. It was realizing that someone I loved, someone I'd trusted my whole life, had been actively trying to hurt me for years. Tyler didn't just want to compete with me or outshine me. He wanted me to disappear completely. Tyler's defense attorney tried to paint a picture of family dysfunction and mental health issues, arguing that Tyler's actions were the result of undiagnosed psychological problems rather than criminal intent. But Tyler himself destroyed that defense strategy when he took the stand in his own defense. Instead of showing remorse or acknowledging his psychological issues, Tyler doubled down on his hatred. He testified that I had always been weak and pathetic, that my medical needs had been a burden on our family, and that he'd been trying to toughen me up rather than hurt me seriously. Brant has spent his whole life using his asthma to get special treatment and avoid responsibility, Tyler told the jury with chilling calm. If he'd been stronger, if he'd been more like me, none of this would have been necessary. The prosecutor's cross-examination was devastating. When asked about the camping incident, Tyler admitted he'd deliberately thrown my inhaler in the lake, but claimed it was to force me to breathe through the panic. When confronted with evidence of his embezzlement, Tyler argued that I'd been incompetent and he'd been trying to protect the family business. Most damning was Tyler's response when asked about the break-in materials found in his car. He claimed the zip ties and plastic bags were for restraining Brant during a medical emergency so he could get proper help. But when pressed about why he needed detailed floor plans of my apartment and information about security cameras, Tyler's composure finally cracked. He was going to ruin everything, Tyler said, his voice rising. The business, the family reputation, everything I'd worked for. Someone had to stop him before he destroyed us all. The courtroom was silent as the jury absorbed Tyler's words. He'd essentially confessed to planning my murder, justifying it as necessary to protect his own interests. His defense attorney looked defeated as Tyler continued talking, digging himself deeper with every word. I was the successful one. I was the one who deserved to inherit the company. Brant was just taking up space, taking resources that should have gone to someone who could actually use them properly. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: assault, with intent to cause bodily harm, criminal harassment, embezzlement, and attempted murder with premeditation. Tyler showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, but I saw our mother break down crying in the gallery behind us. Judge Martinez sentenced Tyler to 12 years in prison for the attempted murder charge plus additional time for the other convictions, with the sentences to run concurrently. The judge also ordered Tyler to pay restitution for the embezzled funds and court costs. Mr. Sterling. Judge Martinez addressed Tyler directly. Your actions represent a particularly troubling form of family violence. You used your intimate knowledge of your brother's medical condition as a weapon against him, escalating from harassment to what could have been murder. The premeditated nature of your final plan shows a level of calculation that demands serious consequences. Tyler's final words to me, spoken as the bailiff led him away in shackles, were typically, "Tyler, this isn't over. You'll never be half the man I am even with me in prison." But it was over at least the criminal part. The healing would take much longer. Dad and I spent months rebuilding the company's reputation and client relationships. We implemented new financial controls and workplace safety protocols to prevent similar issues in the future. More importantly, we began rebuilding our relationship based on honesty about Tyler's behavior and my own capabilities. I spent so many years focused on Tyler's achievements that I missed your strengths completely. Dad admitted during one of our regular coffee meetings, your innovation, your client relationships, your ability to lead through crisis rather than intimidation. Those are the qualities that will keep this company successful. Dad formally transitioned company leadership to me 18 months after Tyler's conviction. Sterling and Sons not only recovered from the scandal, but became more successful than ever. The sustainable building techniques I'd developed, which Tyler had tried to steal credit for, led to major contracts with environmentally conscious developers and several industry awards. Mom's healing was more difficult. She struggled with guilt about enabling Tyler's behavior and missing the warning signs of his psychological problems. Family therapy helped, but she still has trouble talking about Tyler without crying. I keep thinking about all the times you tried to tell me something was wrong, and I didn't listen, she told me recently. I failed both my sons in different ways. My relationship with Sarah survived and eventually thrived. Understanding the manipulation Tyler had used to undermine our relationship actually brought us closer together. She began attending asthma support groups with me and became an advocate for medical condition awareness in the workplace. We married 2 years after Tyler's conviction in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard, the same place where Tyler had nearly killed me. It felt important to reclaim that space for something positive and life-affirming, rather than letting Tyler's actions define it forever. I still carry my rescue inhaler everywhere I go, but I no longer feel ashamed of my medical needs or apologetic about accommodations I require for my health. Tyler's attacks taught me the difference between reasonable support and enabling weakness. Managing asthma effectively isn't weakness. It's responsible self-care that allows me to live a full, productive life. I also became involved in advocacy work around medical abuse and family violence. Tyler's case highlighted how family members can weaponize medical conditions against each other, something that happens more often than most people realize. I've spoken at conferences for healthcare workers and law enforcement about recognizing signs of medical abuse and taking such reports seriously. The most unexpected development was a relationship with Marcus's son Danny, who has asthma, similar to mine. Danny was 15 when Tyler was convicted, and he'd been struggling with bullies at school who targeted his medical condition. My experience with Tyler helped me mentor Danny through developing confidence and coping strategies. You can't let other people make you feel bad about needing medication to breathe, I told Danny during one of our talks. That's like feeling bad about wearing glasses to see or using crutches for a broken leg. Medical conditions aren't character flaws, and people who target them are showing their own weakness, not exposing yours. Tyler never contacted me from prison, and I never attempted to visit him. Some people suggested I should try to rebuild our relationship for the sake of family unity, but Patricia advised me that maintaining no contact was safer and healthier for everyone involved. Tyler showed a pattern of escalating violence that culminated in attempted murder, Patricia explained. People with those psychological patterns rarely change even with treatment. Protecting yourself and your family from further contact isn't cruel, it's wise. Dad occasionally gets letters from Tyler asking for money or legal help with appeals, but we've maintained strict no-contact policies. Tyler is eligible for parole in 8 years, but Patricia is already preparing to oppose his release and ensure that protective orders remain in place. The hardest part of healing wasn't forgiving Tyler or dealing with the trauma of his attacks. The hardest part was learning to trust my own instincts again. Tyler had spent years convincing me that my perceptions were wrong, that his behavior was normal, sibling rivalry, that my medical needs were excessive and burdensome. Recovery meant relearning that I could trust my own judgment about people and situations, that my medical needs were legitimate and reasonable, and that I deserved relationships based on respect rather than manipulation and control. 5 years after Tyler's conviction, I'm running a successful construction company that employs 43 people in the Denver metro area. We've built a reputation for innovative, sustainable projects and exceptional employee treatment. Several of our key employees are people who worked with Tyler and chose to stay with the company after witnessing his conviction. Sarah and I have 2 young children now, both healthy with no signs of asthma or other medical issues. But we're prepared to support them if they develop any health challenges. And we've already talked about how to recognize and prevent the kind of medical abuse Tyler inflicted on me. My parents are actively involved grandparents who've worked hard to understand their mistakes with Tyler and avoid repeating them. They attend family therapy sessions with us regularly and have become advocates for asthma awareness in their community organizations. The most meaningful moment of healing came 3 years ago when I was asked to speak at a conference for families affected by medical abuse. During my presentation, I realized I was talking about Tyler's actions without anger or fear for the first time since the barbecue incident. My brother's abuse taught me something important about strength. I told the audience, real strength isn't about never needing help or never showing vulnerability. Real strength is about building a life that honors your authentic needs while contributing meaningfully to other people's well-being. Tyler thought my asthma made me weak that needing medical support was shameful, that being different from him made me less valuable as a person. But surviving his attacks and building a successful life despite his interference proved exactly the opposite. I've learned that carrying an inhaler doesn't make me weak any more than wearing glasses makes someone blind. Managing my medical condition responsibly allows me to live fully, work effectively, and love deeply. Tyler's inability to understand that difference ultimately destroyed his life while making mine stronger. The courtroom scene 5 years ago, watching Tyler tremble as the judge read his sentence, wasn't really about revenge or even justice. It was about truth finally being recognized and consequences finally being applied to someone who'd spent years avoiding both. Today, Tyler is still in prison serving his sentence and apparently showing no remorse for his actions, according to prison counselors. I'm running a thriving business raising healthy children and maintaining relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well despite someone's attempts to destroy you. Tyler wanted to erase me from our family and steal my achievements for himself. Instead, his actions revealed his own moral bankruptcy while helping me discover strengths I never knew I had. That trembling 25-year-old in the courtroom thought he was the stronger brother because he could run faster and breathe easier. But real strength isn't about physical superiority or ruthless competition. Real strength is about building other people up rather than tearing them down, about facing your own limitations with honesty, rather than attacking others for theirs. Tyler may have been the golden child growing up, but I'm the one who learned how to build something golden that lasts. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who used your vulnerabilities against you? How did you find the courage to fight back when the odds seemed stacked against you? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding strength through adversity. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone in dealing with family members who use their medical conditions or other vulnerabilities as weapons. Thank you for listening to my story and allowing me to share this difficult but ultimately hopeful journey with you. Remember that your medical needs don't make you weak. Your vulnerabilities don't make you less valuable. And there are always people ready to support you when you find the courage to speak your truth. Stay strong, take care of your health, and never let anyone convince you that needing help makes you less worthy of love and respect.